February 21st, 1965, 3:05 p.m. The Audubon Ballroom, Harlem. Malcolm X stood at the podium in front of 400 people. He'd just opened his mouth to speak when a man in the third row jumped up, screaming, "Get your hand out of my pocket!" Heads turned, a distraction. Then the shotgun blast tore through the room. Malcolm's chest exploded. Before anyone could move, two more men rushed the stage, pistols firing. Pop, 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 pop. 15 shots. 7 seconds. Malcolm X collapsed, blood spreading across the stage floor, his eyes still open, staring at nothing. The room erupted, screaming, stampeding, chaos. In the back corner, pressed against the wall in a dark suit and fedora, stood Bumpy Johnson. He didn't scream, didn't run. He just stood there, watching Malcolm die, watching the three shooters, memorizing their faces. One of them, a stocky man with a shotgun, tried to flee but was tackled by the crowd and beaten half to death. The other two vanished into the chaos, but Bumpy saw them. He knew their names. He knew who sent them. And 3 days later, when two FBI agents walked into his office and told him to talk or die, Bumpy Johnson did something no black man in 1960s America had ever done. He looked the most powerful law enforcement agency in the country dead in the eye and said, "No, but I'll make you a deal." This is the story of how Bumpy Johnson survived Malcolm X's assassination by turning the FBI into his own personal insurance policy, and walked away with something more valuable than money or power: control. February 14th, 1965, 1 week before Malcolm died. Bumpy Johnson sat in his office above Small's Paradise nightclub at 2 a.m., listening to a man he didn't trust tell him something he didn't want to hear. The man's name was Jerome, a low-level hustler who ran errands for the Nation of Islam's Newark Mosque. Jerome was scared. His hands shook as he lit a cigarette. "They're going to kill him, Mr. Johnson." "Who?" "Malcolm, the minister. They got orders from Chicago." Bumpy leaned back in his chair. "You sure about this?" "I was in the room when they said it. Captain Joseph, Brother Norman, Brother Thomas, they got the green light, Sunday, at the Audubon." Bumpy studied Jerome's face. Fear didn't lie. "Why are you telling me?" Jerome looked down. "Because Malcolm's a good man, and because if they kill him, Harlem's going to burn. My family lives here. I don't want my kids caught in the middle of a war." Bumpy pulled out an envelope, counted out $500, and slid it across the desk. "Take your family to Jersey for a week. Don't come back until it's over." Jerome took the money and left. Bumpy sat alone in the dark, thinking. He'd known Malcolm X for 15 years. They weren't friends. Malcolm didn't have friends, only allies and enemies. But they understood each other. Both had come from the streets. Both had survived prison. Both knew what it meant to fight a system designed to crush you. And now Malcolm was about to die because he dared to walk away from the one organization that had given him power. Bumpy picked up the phone and made a call. It rang 4 times before a woman's voice answered. "Sister Betty, it's Bumpy. I need to talk to Malcolm. He's not here. When he gets back, tell him I need to see him tonight. He's not taking meetings. Tell him it's about Sunday." Silence on the line. Then, "I'll tell him." February 15th, 1965, 11:30 p.m. Malcolm X walked into Bumpy's office alone. No bodyguards, no entourage, just him, wearing a dark suit and tie, looking thinner and more exhausted than Bumpy had ever seen him. They didn't shake hands. Malcolm sat down. Betty said it was urgent. Bumpy didn't waste time. They're going to hit you. Sunday, at the Audubon, Newark Mosque, 3 shooters, maybe more. Malcolm nodded slowly, like he'd already known. I appreciate the warning. Let me put people there. Outside. Inside. You won't even see them. No. Malcolm. I said no. Malcolm's voice was calm but final. If I surround myself with guns, I become what they say I am. A gangster, a thug, a hypocrite. You'll be a dead hypocrite. Malcolm smiled. Not happy, just resigned. Bumpy leaned forward. This isn't about Allah. This is about men with guns who want you dead. Let me help you. You can't help me, not this time. Malcolm stood up. But I'll tell you something. When I'm gone, don't go to war over it. Don't burn Harlem down trying to get revenge, because that's what they want. They want chaos. They want the community to tear itself apart. He walked to the door, then stopped. You're a smart man, Bumpy. Smarter than most. So when this is over, do what you do best. What's that? Survive. Malcolm left. Bumpy never saw him alive again. February 21st, 1965. Bumpy arrived at the Audubon Ballroom at 2 p.m. He brought 3 men with him, Illinois Gordon, Junie Bird, and Nat Pettigrew, and stationed them at different points around the room. Don't do anything unless I give the signal, Bumpy told them. We're here to watch, that's all. The ballroom filled up quickly. Families, activists, reporters. Betty Shabazz and her 4 daughters sat in the front row. At 3 p.m., Malcolm walked onto the stage. He looked out at the crowd, took a breath, and began. Assalamu alaikum. The man in the 3rd row stood up, screaming about his pocket. Bumpy's hand moved toward the .38 under his coat, then the shotgun blast. The sound was deafening, like the air itself had been ripped apart. Malcolm's chest exploded, his body jerking backward. 2 more men rushed the stage, firing pistols into Malcolm's body as he fell. The crowd stampeded, women screaming, children crying, chairs flying. Bumpy stayed perfectly still, his back against the wall, his eyes locked on the shooters. The man with the shotgun, Talmadge Hayer, tried to run but was caught by the crowd and beaten until the police arrived. The other 2, Norman Butler and Thomas Johnson, sprinted for the side exits and disappeared into Harlem. But Bumpy saw something no one else did. A 4th man, standing near the back exit, half hidden in shadow, watching the whole thing unfold with cold, emotionless eyes. Not shooting, not running, just watching. When the chaos peaked, the man turned and walked out calmly, like he'd just finished watching a play. Bumpy memorized his face, his walk, the way he held himself, and he knew instantly that this man wasn't just a shooter. He was the one who'd made sure it happened. February 27th, 1965. Malcolm X was buried at Ferncliff Cemetery in Westchester. Over 2,500 people attended. Bumpy stood in the back, wearing dark glasses, saying nothing. He watched as Ossie Davis delivered the eulogy. He watched as Betty Shabazz wept over the casket. He watched as the crowd filed past one by one to say goodbye to a man who dared to speak truth to power and paid for it with his life. And Bumpy made a decision. Malcolm had told him to survive, so that's exactly what he was going to do. But survival didn't mean hiding. It meant control. March 1st, 1965, 8 days after the assassination. Bumpy was sitting in his office, going through ledgers, when the door opened. No knock. 2 white men in dark suits walked in. FBI. The taller one, square jaw, cold eyes, mid-40s, sat down without being invited and dropped a file on Bumpy's desk. Mr. Johnson, I'm Special Agent Frank Sullivan. This is Agent Reeves. We need to talk about February 21st. Bumpy didn't look up from his ledger. I don't know what you're talking about. Sullivan opened the file and pulled out a photograph. Malcolm X, dead. Blood everywhere. You were at the Audubon Ballroom. We have 8 witnesses who saw you there. We know you and Malcolm had a relationship. We know you tried to warn him. And we know you saw who shot him. Bumpy closed the ledger and finally looked up. If you have 8 witnesses, you don't need me. Sullivan leaned forward, his voice hard. Here's how this works. You give us names. You testify if we need you. And in return, we forget about your business activities. And if I don't? Sullivan smiled, cold, bureaucratic, like a man who'd done this 1,000 times. Then we destroy you. Tax evasion, racketeering, conspiracy. We'll freeze your bank accounts, shut down your clubs, arrest your associates. By the time we're done with you, Harlem won't even remember your name. Agent Reeves added, his voice quieter but more menacing. Or we let it slip to the Nation of Islam that you're cooperating with us. Let them handle you. It was a textbook squeeze. Talk or die. Most men would have broken right there. But Bumpy Johnson wasn't most men. He'd survived Dutch Schultz. He'd survived Lucky Luciano. He'd survived 30 years in the most dangerous game in America. And he wasn't about to fold to 2 FBI agents. Bumpy stood up slowly, walked to the window, and looked out at Harlem. His Harlem. Then he turned back to Sullivan. I'll give you 2 names. Sullivan's eyes lit up. Good, we'll need... But first, Bumpy interrupted, you're going to give me something. Sullivan's smile faded. Excuse me? Bumpy walked to his desk, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a thick manila folder. He dropped it in front of Sullivan. The agent opened it. Inside were FBI surveillance logs, wiretap transcripts, internal memos, all stamped classified. Sullivan's face went white. Where the hell did you get this? Bumpy sat down, lit a cigar, and let the smoke curl toward the ceiling. You think you're the only ones with informants? I've had people watching you for 3 years. Courthouse clerks, secretaries, even a janitor at Federal Plaza who makes copies of whatever I ask for. He leaned forward. I know about COINTELPRO. I know you had Malcolm under 24-hour surveillance. I know you intercepted at least 5 credible death threats against him in the last 2 months. And I know you did absolutely nothing to stop it. Sullivan's jaw clenched so hard, Bumpy could hear his teeth grinding. Possessing classified documents is a federal crime. Bumpy smiled. So arrest me, and watch every one of those documents hit the front page of the New York Times by tomorrow morning. Reeves spoke up, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. J. Edgar Hoover will never let you walk out of here. J. Edgar Hoover doesn't have a choice. Bumpy tapped the folder. Because I've already made 3 copies. One's with my lawyer. One's with a journalist who hates the FBI more than he hates me. And one's buried in a place even I can't get to without making a phone call first. He looked Sullivan dead in the eye. So here's the deal, Agent Sullivan. If anything happens to me, if I get arrested, if I disappear, if I die in some convenient accident, if I even catch a parking ticket I don't deserve, those files go public, and the whole world learns that the FBI knew Malcolm X was going to be assassinated and sat back and watched it happen. The room went silent. Sullivan stared at Bumpy for a long, dangerous moment. Then he stood up, grabbed the folder, and walked to the door. Before leaving, he turned back. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life, Mr. Johnson." Bumpy took a slow drag from his cigar. "No, Agent Sullivan, I'm making sure I don't end up like Malcolm." The door slammed. Shh. For 3 days, Bumpy didn't leave Small's Paradise. He had 6 men stationed downstairs with shotguns, another 8 watching the street. If the FBI was coming for him, he'd see them coming. But they didn't come. No raids, no arrests, no accidents. On the 4th day, Agent Sullivan returned. Alone this time. He looked exhausted. "Hoover's furious," Sullivan said, sitting down. "But he's agreed to your terms." Bumpy nodded. "Then let's talk." Sullivan pulled out a notepad. "Give me the names." "Talmadge Hayer, you already have him." "We know. Who else?" "Norman 3X Butler, Thomas 15X Johnson, both Newark Mosque. Both were at the Audubon. I saw them shoot Malcolm." Sullivan wrote the names down. "Can you testify?" "No." "Why not?" "Because if I testify in open court, I'm dead within 48 hours. The nation will put a contract on me that you can't protect me from." Sullivan frowned. "Then how do we prove Butler and Johnson were there?" Bumpy slid another folder across the desk. Inside were 3 photographs, grainy, taken from the back of the ballroom, but clear enough to show Butler and Johnson near the stage moments before the shooting. Sullivan stared at them. "Who took these?" "Someone I trust." "We'll need the negatives." "You'll get prints. The negatives stay with me. Insurance." Sullivan studied the photos, then looked up. "Hoover's going to want more. He'll want to know if there were others involved. Higher-ups in the nation, people who financed the operation." Bumpy's expression hardened. "That's where the deal ends." "What do you mean?" "I mean there were others. People with money, people with power. But their names stay with me." Sullivan leaned forward. "You're obstructing a federal investigation." "I'm preventing a war." "What war?" Bumpy stood up and walked to the window. "You want me to name every person involved in Malcolm's death? Fine. I'll give you names. But when I do, the Nation of Islam will fracture. Half will say it was an inside job. Half will say it was the FBI. And every black neighborhood in America will turn into a battlefield." He turned back to Sullivan. "Is that what Hoover wants? Riots in 50 cities? Thousands dead?" Sullivan said nothing. "Here's the deal," Bumpy continued. "You arrest Butler and Johnson. You prosecute them. You get your convictions. But you don't dig any deeper. You don't go after the nation's leadership. You don't turn this into a public circus. And in return? In return, Harlem stays quiet. No riots, no revenge killings, no headlines about how the FBI let Malcolm die." Sullivan stared at him for a long moment. Then he closed his notepad and stood up. "I'll take this to Hoover." "You do that." Sullivan walked to the door, then stopped. "One more question, Mr. Johnson." "What? Were there really others involved? Or are you just protecting yourself?" Bumpy smiled. "Does it matter?" Sullivan left, and Bumpy Johnson went back to his desk, knowing he'd just done something no black man in 1965 America had ever done. He'd made the FBI blink. March 10th, 1965. Norman 3X Butler and Thomas 15X Johnson were arrested at their homes in the Bronx. March 1966. All three men, Hayer, Butler, Johnson, were convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. The public was satisfied. The FBI closed the case, and Bumpy Johnson kept his COINTELPRO files locked in a safe for the next 3 years, untouched. The FBI never came for him again. But here's what Bumpy never told the FBI. There was a fourth man at the Audubon, the man in the shadows, the man who'd watched Malcolm die and walked away clean. Bumpy knew his name, knew his face, knew exactly who he worked for, but he never said a word. Not to the FBI, not to the press, not even to his closest friends. Why? Because that man had powerful allies, and if Bumpy named him, it wouldn't just start a war. It would start a war Harlem couldn't win. So Bumpy made a choice. He gave the FBI 2 names. He kept the third, and he carried that secret to his grave. July 7th, 1968. Bumpy Johnson died of a heart attack at Wells Restaurant in Harlem. He was 62 years old. When his office was cleaned out, the FBI files were gone. Some say his family destroyed them. Others say they were passed to someone Bumpy trusted, someone who could use them if the government ever came for Harlem again. But no one knows for sure. What we do know, November 2021, 56 years after Malcolm X's assassination, Norman 3X Butler and Thomas 15X Johnson were exonerated. New evidence proved they weren't at the Audubon ballroom that day. The Manhattan District Attorney admitted the FBI and NYPD had withheld evidence, manipulated witnesses, and convicted 2 innocent men to close the case quickly. The only shooter who was actually there, Talmadge Hayer, which means one of 2 things. Either Bumpy Johnson gave the FBI the wrong names, or the FBI used his names to frame innocent men and protect the real conspirators. Either way, the truth died with Bumpy, and the fourth man, the one Bumpy saw but never named, was never caught, never charged, never even investigated. To this day, no one knows who he was. February 21st, 1965. Malcolm X died with 15 bullets in his body. 3 men went to prison. 2 of them were innocent. And Bumpy Johnson walked away with something more valuable than money or revenge. He walked away with immunity, not because the government gave it to him, but because he'd made himself too dangerous to touch. The FBI thought they were squeezing Bumpy, but Bumpy was squeezing them. He'd turned the assassination of Malcolm X, one of the most powerful black leaders in American history, into leverage. And when he walked out of that office in March 1965, he'd rewritten the rules of the game. Malcolm had told him to survive, and Bumpy didn't just survive. He thrived. For 3 more years, he ran Harlem untouched, protected not by guns or muscle, but by the files he kept in his safe. Files that could destroy the most powerful man in America. That's not just power. That's mastery. And maybe, just maybe, that's what Malcolm meant when he told Bumpy to do what he did best. Not just survive. Zwin, I really want to know, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your country or city in the comments below. This story has reached people from every corner of the globe, and I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one.